It's Friday night, so welcome everybody to our show, the Asea Fabulous Five. We have our regulars that are here every week, every Friday night with you. Me, Dr. Maureen Hayes from Galveston, Texas. Jim and Ann Glenn from San Antonio, Texas. Ann is our nutritionist and our physical personal trainer, and Jim is our money man. And of course, we have our celebrated Dr. Lee Ostler from Washington State. As you know, he's one of the founders and first presidents of AOSH, the American Academy for Oral Systemic Health, and an acclaimed author. And tonight we have his beautiful wife, Stephanie, here to kind of tell us how this all began for the Ostlers. So I'd love to have Lee and Stephanie come on and kind of tell us a little bit about their story, about the background, how you got introduced to Asea, what it's meant for you. And then Dr. Lee, if you would tell us what inspired you to write this incredible book that we're all loving. So take it over. We'll ask questions if you don't mind. We'll be interrupting and asking questions along the way. So thanks so much. And thanks for being here, Stephanie.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. And hello, everybody. It's my privilege to be here with my lovely wife, who is really kind of the person responsible for me being here. If it hadn't been for her not being well, I probably wouldn't have ever discovered this, and we wouldn't have gone down this path. So the story for us began a long time ago, 35 plus years ago, where Stephanie began to not be well, and she went from doctor to doctor to doctor. We've been to plenty of doctors over the last 3.5 decades, trying to figure out what it was that was going on. And we'll fill in some of the details later, but the reason that kicked this off from a Redox point of view is that in 2018, we were sitting at an appointment with her physician, and she had been kind of plateauing, not thriving, not doing as well as we had hoped. And I said, I asked him, I said, what else can we do? I mean, is there something else? This is a brilliant MD, has a doctorate in pharmacology, spent 6 years in pharmacology research, came back into internal medicine. He gets all the tough cases in our community. So we felt very confident in his management and his help. But he looked at us and he said, he almost muttered it. He says, I think you should get around to some redox signaling molecules. And I sat back and I looked at him and I said, what is that? And he goes, just go Google it and get some. And so I said, well, kind of help me some more. And he goes, I think it'll help. Just go find it and get some. So that was the end really of the conversation. I did go away. We Googled it, and I happened to come across some information that actually Dr. Hayes, our beautiful Maureen Hayes, had on YouTube. And I didn't know her at the time. I just watched her doing some interviews with some other doctors. I did find a site. I just happened on the site. Nobody came to me with this. I went to them, ordered some, and I gave some to Stephanie, and it was like, here, this is what he said to do, you take it. And so she did, and it was within probably about 36 to 48 hours. She just, it was like flipping a switch is the way I describe it. And that got my attention. And so that's when I said, well, I know this physician that I found her online doing these interviews. And the irony is that 2 weeks later, there was a professional meeting in Vegas for the American Academy for Oral Systemic Health. I'm a past president of that academy and had been in charge of many of the scientific meetings, to date, but not this time. I'd passed the torch and I wasn't really involved in the program or the leadership anymore. I was more on the, I guess, the emeritus status of the advisory board. And so, but I thought, well, I'm going to hop online and see who's going to be speaking and who the exhibitors are at this meeting coming up in a couple of weeks. And there was Asea as an exhibitor in this meeting. It was a dual meeting with the American College for the Advancement of Medicine, which is a functional medicine and integrative medicine group. We were having a dual meeting with them, and there's Asea, and there's this Maureen Hayes name again as the sponsor of the booth, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, this is like the second thing. Actually, it was the third thing in about 2 weeks' time that was about Asea, and one of them was that my wife had this great response to it. The third one was a couple of months before. I'd been reading, I was researching herbs, thinking maybe we could find some herbs that might help her. And I read about Asea and redox signaling in an herb book of all places. And I thought, I don't even know why they would include that as an herb. It clearly was not an herb. And I just passed over it. So I guess this was the third time, and within about 2 months, I had come across this. And I'm just thinking, like, this is messages from heaven or something. So I called Maureen and I just said, look, tell me about this. I'm looking forward to meeting you in Vegas, and you can tell me all about this. And she copped out and went to London with her husband to get an award for him. He's a physician, stem cell researcher, and I guess he had some pig lungs up on the space station being cloned or something. He was getting an award for that. So she skipped out, but she did pass me off to several other physicians who were going to be there. The bottom line is I went to this meeting, and there was a lot of cell detox, redox biochemistry, gut-brain axis stuff, functional medicine stuff, diet stuff, that kind of all revolved around this redox. And I'm, with all this going on, I'm sitting there and the light just went on. This was kind of a dental meeting as well, but the light went on, and I thought maybe there's something here for dentistry, but this has got a big play on overall health. So that was how I came into this, was, again, that experience with my wife, her issues, and her physician recommending that we get that. And it was a timing thing. There was just 2 or 3 things that all happened real quickly that put it in front of us. And then I took my little OCD brain sideways with it, and I thought, I've got to know how this works, and I've got to know why. It's just kind of the way I'm wired. And so that was the beginning of a long research endeavor that I didn't realize I was writing a book at the time. I was just putting notes and bibliography material together. I'd given some presentations on redox and redox dentistry, for example, and so I was doing a lot of that. But as it went along, it just slowly started to come together, and I realized that there was a need for a better explanation. And I don't mean to discount anything that had come along before, but I certainly wasn't understanding it as well. It wasn't being translated in my language, I guess. And so, as it turns out, it's been a nice thing. So that's kind of how the setup happened. I think Stephanie maybe can add her 2 cents worth here, and maybe she can tell what it was like beforehand.
I went from being mom to 5, cooking, cleaning, doing lots of crafts, to being stuck in bed all day long, because to take care of my, what's it called?
She has an endocrine disorder. Is that what you're talking about?
No,
Discomfort.
my discomfort. They put me on high doses of pharmaceuticals that basically made me a vegetable. I laid in bed all day.
She was on high doses of narcotics and sleep medicines and antidepressants, basically around the clock. And I think probably for the better part of 10 years, she spent most of her life in bed in the bedroom. And this was a home that, as I said, we started this 30 some odd years ago. We built a new home. She had a lot of environmental sensitivities. So we made the home as environmentally friendly as we could, with paints and special cabinets without formaldehyde, no carpeting, radiant heat, special air scrubbers. And she just basically lived with a respirator. She's got one here. We've got smoke outside, and so she wears a painter's mask still because of the smoke and the fires in our region. But that was a 24/7, year after year thing for her. This started as we have to be compliant here. It was an endocrine disorder, and with the pituitary gland. And so she had these crazy cells that were kind of, dividing rapidly in her pituitary, around her pituitary gland, that were without regulatory control. And so that meant that all of her hormones through her whole body were getting off, were out of whack. And there was no feedback mechanisms to do this. And so she wound up losing her adrenal glands. She wound up in some pretty crisis situations. It took several years for her to bounce back just from that. And gradually the sensitivities started to diminish. But it was always this languishing, the best they told us at the time is that she'd have maybe 85% of a normal life, for the rest of her life when it was all done. And so there were a lot of ups and downs, seizures, there's just, it's like every 18 months, there was a new disorder that came along that we had to go figure out because it was just one thing after the other. And so again, that was the prelude to that momentous time when we sat with our physician and he made that suggestion. He had just heard about it, which is why his recommendation wasn't couched with more information. He had just barely heard about it. And I quite frankly think he was just kind of grasping at some straws because he wasn't quite sure. This disorder that she has is very rare. It's like 1 in 300,000. So you really wind up in a big city where you're going to find any kind of access to reasonable care. And then Asea came along. And if you don't mind, I'm going to share my screen. And I hope I can do this.
Yeah, you should be able to, no problem.
Yeah, great.
Oh, yes.
All right, can you
remember
see
seeing
that?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay, so this is kind of a timeline. This is April 26th, 2018.
You
And
lost
Now
the
you
shot.
lost your screen.
Did you
Okay.
click somewhere? There you
There you
go.
go.
Keep it on
there
that.
you go.
There you go.
Okay. So this is April 26th, 2018. That was just the day we took this picture. So we knew there was a date stamp on that one. And October 25th was a day or two after we'd visited with a physician and got the redox signaling started. And that was 3 weeks later on November 15th. And then 2 weeks after that, she felt good enough to put makeup on and we went on our first date in, I don't know, probably years.
That's
And,
lovely.
that was to the theater. And this was really rare because to go to a public setting is not just, she's not able to do that and to be around other
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure
Monumental.
how do I get unshare the screen?
Click it out. Jim, you can
There you go.
be able to X out of those pictures.
All right, are we back on with us?
Well, no,
Not totally.
Oh,
Here
yeah.
we are.
Ah.
Fix it.
Okay.
So
Got
that
it.
was just some pictures there of kind of the before and after. That was in 2018, and so it's been hasn't been a perfect ride for her. Again, she's missing some of the original equipment here from an endocrine point of view, and some of the consequences of that still linger. However, adding redox support with Asea has been a marvelous addition. Anything else?
No.
did you do 8 ounces a day to start, or did you build up, go slow for a potential detox, or what? How did you do it?
I think I started at 2, then I went up to 4,
Okay. Yeah.
then I went up to 6.
Good.
Now I'm
Twice
doing
a day?
3. Yeah. Or
So
no,
2 twice a day, 4 twice a day, or
the 6 was 3 times a day.
Okay. 2, 2, 2. Great.
okay.
Good way to build it up.
And so how do you feel today, Stephanie?
I had to take Benadryl this morning because of all the smoke.
Yeah.
So I've been in bed most of the day, but
But overall,
Compared to where you
I'm
were,
feeling so much better.
It's awesome.
I'm
So-
back to doing lots of crafts.
Good.
and so Lee, what's it like having your wife back?
well, it's like suddenly I have to share my time. To get projects done, I just get a laptop and go sit on the bed with her because I could take my desk to the bed and I could kind of be with her, and I just sit on the bed with my laptop and do writing and projects and whatnot. But we still don't get out a lot. It's not a perfect world for her, but it's certainly she's able to be in public, and we can have people come over, and And that's very different. She's been very isolated, for probably 20 years. And so that wears on you. And it's a different
Sure.
lifestyle that you just can't appreciate. Even if you knew about it, it's hard to appreciate.
So what's it
Wow.
like having your kids and grandkids around, Stephanie?
Oh, it's wonderful. Yeah.
And were you not able to enjoy that before?
No, not a lot. Like there was a lot of family functions I didn't get to go to because I was stuck in bed.
It's amazing. And especially with the chemical sensitivity. We, Jim and Ann and I were up in Washington State just a few weeks ago, and it was pretty hard to breathe out there.
Yeah.
The fires are not close, but that smoke is so heavy in the air.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I can't
Well,
imagine
some-
that all the time right now. Oh,
Someone asked in the chat here about, nebulizing, and that is something that we do a lot when she has respiratory or lung issues, is we'll put the Asea in a nebulizer, and it's been very helpful for her. So,
Now we need to throw in the medical
The
claim.
disclaimer. Yeah.
do it.
This is, although we're medical professionals, Dr. Lee and myself, this is not a medical product. It's not a medical company. These products aren't meant to treat, diagnose, or cure anything. What they do is they work inside the cells. This is something that we make in every cell of our body, but we just have less of as we get older or if our body is under stress. And so this is a bioreplenishment agent. We're boosting up the volume of these molecules so that our cells can work better, that they can communicate better, and they function like they're a much younger cell. And what we see from that can sometimes be absolutely miraculous. So even that terminology of using it in that machine that we use to aerosolize it is kind of a medical equipment usually for a medical treatment. But, if you aerosolize it and breathe the molecules, they get into the lungs faster. You can do it even with a Vicks Coolmist humidifier. My husband calls it my spa treatment. Pour a bottle of Asea in it, and I just let those molecules waft over me, and I sleep with it on that all night long. So
What was
anyway,
that word?
waft?
Waft?
Waft.
waft.
I've never heard that terminology. That's a new one, Maureen.
I might have made
Jim
it
got
up.
a Jim,
Hey, Lee, is
I'll
that in
look
your
it up.
book?
I haven't used the
It
word
should
waft.
be.
no.
that was-
Jim got a
That was
new
nice
big
to have
word.
her, be introduced to y'all and to kind of hear. She was the instigator behind my introduction into this. And
Right.
like I say,
So-
as that began to happen, I started to take a deep interest in the science. I just felt like I had to establish the science as the real thing.
Right.
Okay, now I would like to have you share the rest of the story, though, Lee. Why did you really have to write the book?
Well, that's thank you for that question.
And I know this is a not an easy topic for you, okay? But I think people really do need to understand the real reason. But I know, Stephanie, that's life-changing, but there's the other side of the coin.
Well, let's talk about the chicken bone,
That's
Well,
Yeah.
I was just going to say that as I started to get into this, and I've expressed this sentiment on this program before, is that to me this was a chicken bone. When I discovered, after we went and got it, I kind of had an idea that's what this was, and I told Maureen, I said, if this really works, it's like obviously I want to sign up because we want it, right? But it was kind of like, please tell me that this isn't one of those. Please tell me that this is not network marketing. And where that came from is I grew up in a family culture that praised or that prized hard work, that prized real jobs, and it largely came. And I'm saying this respectfully, bless my father's soul. He's passed away, but he always felt very inadequate. We lived in a community of PhDs and chemists, and this is the location where the nuclear material was created for World War II, and so we were surrounded by chemical, physicists and so on and so forth, and he really didn't fit in, and he always talked about not fitting in well. but he was inclined to want to be successful, and so he followed or accepted or went after pretty much any deal or scheme or get rich quick, whatever you want to call it, that came along. And there were, I'd like to say hundreds, that's probably an exaggeration. There were dozens and dozens. And my mother, I'm the oldest of seven. There's two girls, and of the five boys, she was always after us, like, you're going to grow up and be somebody. And that was just kind of in our culture. And so we did. I'm a dentist. I've got, my other siblings represent orthodontics and physical therapy and audiology and chiropractic, and we're all accomplished and settled, and we became something, and credit my mother's, urging us on for that, and her values and so forth. But through the years, I would have people, acquaintances from the community, from church and so forth, who would approach me and say, so what's your, and would know my dad, and they'd say, so what's your dad up to? What's he selling now? And while they asked that question, what I heard in my mind and in my heart was, what scheme is he chasing now? What get rich
How old
quick
were
thing was
you?
always, this was even into my adulthood.
But
You
you,
know,
but you
They grew
but
up
you
with that.
experienced this. Your
the whole life.
Yeah, growing
It
up.
was the
Okay,
whole
I mean-
life. And not everything that he did. I mean, he was a hard worker, so not everything he did was a get rich quick thing. He just had lots of things going. But he was, some people would say, well, he's kind of a sucker for that kind of stuff. And I'd go, well, that's who he is, I guess. But that was the culture I grew up in. And so when this came along and I realized that it was one of those, literally I had people within the last 5 years ask me that question. This before he passed away. It's like, what's he doing now, type of thing. And again, what I heard, because of my conditioning and my filters, was that's less than honorable. It's like, you need a real job and so forth. So when I realized what this was, and I'm on the one hand, it's like, this is the most awesome sauce I've ever come across. The science is so good, but on the other side, this is like a chicken bone that's sideways in my throat, and I just can't swallow this. I cannot go talk to people because I know what they're going to say. They're going to reject it, and I'm going to feel shame, and I'm going to feel like I should just not do this. I should just stick with my dental career, because that's a real respectable thing. I would be demeaning myself. And so that's been a great, I think, a sore spot for me. And I don't think I really realized that didn't come to the surface literally until I finished writing the book. And I'm sitting there thinking, I just spent 2 years writing and researching this book. Why did I do this? And then it hit me. It really came to me in full force that it's like, I had to prove this. I had to prove that it was legitimate, that it was real, that the science was there, and that it was worth my time. And no amount of positive energy, positive thinking, rah, training or anything like that was ever going to get me past that. And it will still be kind of hard, for me to continue to swallow just because of the emotional backstory. But with that said, I think I've come there. I mean, this is my own, I'm putting myself on the couch, and analyzing myself, I guess, but that's where this came from. And I hope that it is a blessing to everybody who comes across it, and we'll kind of commiserate together, I guess, in our misery if we have shared feelings about why this is or isn't, or we think it is or isn't legitimate. But that's where I came from.
Well, Lee, that's really powerful. And, it hurts my heart because we don't value entrepreneurs enough. This country started with small business people, and then somehow we all got into this idea that we need to punch a time clock and we need to have a job. And that is the more honorable thing. And of course, those of us who are highly educated, it's so funny because I absolutely love what I'm doing and how I'm doing it, and that what we do empowers people. As a physician, the idea of having something this powerful and this safe that allows people to take ownership of their own health is like a dream come true, because we're partnering with people. And you don't even have to have a medical degree. You don't have to go through the background that you and I went through, which I wouldn't change for anything. I love being a doctor. I know you love being a dentist, but I love being able to help people this way. But it is funny how people, and I think Eric Worre says that when you're doing this, you have to endure a short period of sort of a loss of respect from some people who don't understand. But I always say, I follow the people who have what I want, who make the biggest impact, who have the most success and have very happy and fulfilled lives. Those are the people that I emulate, and those are the people that I try to, aspire to be like. And I find that most of the people who would put me down or you down or even your dad down probably don't have what I want. And yet it sometimes takes a little while to realize that. So, I'm so glad that it's saved your wife, that it saved Stephanie, that it's given her a better quality of life. And I'm so thankful that somebody of your caliber and your intellect and your background has joined us and has now written this book, which is absolutely amazing. So it's a God thing, I think. So thank
For
you.
sure. And it saved, of course, Jim's life too. So we know how powerful these molecules are. But I was thinking about a comment you made earlier and pull it into the book. You had said at 18 months, she got, worse. You could see something else show up. And so, which that makes sense because the redox signaling is dropping every year you age. So it makes sense. No, he was describing Stephanie and in her condition. 18 months later, something else showed up. And that is just like, redox dropping is something else is going to show up bad in your health when you're not on these molecules. So, as we age from puberty, we're losing these. And so this is just a bioreplenisher. And so it's exciting to see what, the transitions she has had. I was looking in your book, and there's a quote from Dr. Watson on page 233 about a blood sugar disorder being a redox condition. And that's just like what Dr. Ward used to say, that every issue known to man is because of lack of redox. So maybe you could address that point and just some things that you learned as you were studying. I love reading all the stuff you post about NFR2 and, redox and dental work and in our body. I love everything that you share whenever you post. So maybe you could share a little bit about the content of your book.
I'd be happy to. There's a concept and a principle that is emerging now called the redoxome. And we've heard about the genome, and we know about the metabolome and the proteome and so forth. And the redoxome is that epigenetic layer or level that is below the DNA. We've been talking genome and DNA for years now, and we get our genome tested so that we know what diseases we might get or not get, or what genes we have. And the redoxome is about how the body regulates itself and how it learns to express or unexpress or not express various of the genes that we do have. The really basic question here is how does our body function? How is it designed? How does a cell know when it's in trouble? How does it know when it's toxic? What is it that goes on? And we talk about cell talk, about cellular communication. Well, there's no brain and mouth, and they're not talking as we would think of talking, but there is a method of signaling, or we call it the transduction or movement of electrons on molecules. And so nature is designed with very special molecules in our cells that when conditions shift or change, they behave in a certain way that has a downhill kind of an energy gradient effect that causes and it's called an effector. It has an effect at the end of the line that then does something or triggers something or begins a process or shuts down a process. And that's all biochemistry. I don't want to make this biochemistry, but that's really what this is about. And so these cells and these molecules are functioning and working in the body in a way that help regulate this. And as you pointed out a few minutes ago, our problem is as we age, It's more, is rather than saying that we have less redox signaling molecules, it's more appropriate to say that the redox signaling becomes less. We really don't know if we have less signaling molecules per se, but we know that the signaling becomes less for a variety of different reasons. The bottom line is that we're not activating that pathway, these gene pathways, like we used to when we were younger. And what that means is that now, instead of having a healthy or a good defensive response to these stressors, such as hypoxia or toxins or radiation or chemicals or whatever, instead of being able to respond to that in an appropriate, normal way, we have kind of a muted response to it. And what then happens is that it activates other genes that are related with inflammation, and those are activated because our oxidation state increases. So the balance of between oxidants and reductants tips in favor of oxidation, where we have damage occurring and the activation of these inflammatory pathways that lead to disease. So at the basement level of all this, that's really what's going on in the cell. And that's how the cell knows to do what it's supposed to do. As we age, we have less of those actions, activities, pathway gene activations. We call them transcription factors. That's what NRF2 and the inflammatory transcription factor is NFKB, nuclear factor kappa beta. Those are all the molecules that the cell uses to tell the DNA what to do, when to do it, how to do it, and when not to do it. And as it tips in the direction of inflammation, then we have more disease. So up to this point in medicine, in research and healthcare, inflammation in 2014, I think that was the year, there was a front page magazine picture on inflammation, which was the disease or the common thread that ran through all of chronic disease. Doesn't matter, you name the chronic disease, inflammation was the common thread that ran through them all. And in my background in oral health, this is where the Academy for Oral Systemic Health was born. We knew that there was a connection between the mouth and the body. We just couldn't prove it. When you have gum disease, for example, you have periodontal disease, when you have root canals that go bad or endodontic infection, that bleeds or feeds into the general circulation and increases what we call the whole body inflammatory burden. You're just elevating inflammation through the whole body. And that's why we see this connection between the mouth and brain health and heart health and kidney health and all the other endocrine disorders, the blood sugar issues and so forth. That's the connection. It's not causative, but the connections are so tight that you just can't, there's tens of thousands of linkages that make it so. And as an aside, that's really what brought this when you look at the title, the connecting the dots between redox biology and health. It's the connection. It's like, we can't say this is causative. There isn't any research out there that proves causation the way we want it to. But there are tens and tens of thousands of these connections that tell us that the mouth and the body are connected, that tell us that redox status, redox stress, inefficient redox cycling, all those things redox related are related to all of these disorders in the body, which is why we hear so many different and varying stories. Or you talk to every person who take this wonderful thing, and they'll give you a different story about a different body part or system or skin surface or hair area or whatever it is, a recovery story. And it's all true. It's almost too good to be true. And it's because this is the way we were designed. This is what I mean by when I say this is activating the inner doctor. If you want, there are things in life that are created to act, and there are those that are created to be acted upon. And in our pharmaceutical, our modern healthcare, even in the herbal arena to a significant degree, they are in the act upon mode. If you're not working well because you've had years of dysfunctional cells, then we can act upon them and force them. We can put an agent or a reagent on them that make them or fill in the void or whatever. Obviously, when you remove it, it comes back, but that's acting upon. What we're trying to do is to get down to that, what we call the epigenetic level, that transcription level that allows the cell to act on its own, to heal or repair or recover and to function, on its own from the inside out to the extent possible. Obviously, cases of injury, trauma, experiences like my wife has been through, there are some things, some body parts, some body functions you don't get back. But going here forwards, like, can anybody get a do-over? Well, you can start where you're at. Wherever you're at, you can start, and you can replenish and fill up the gas tank with these bioidentical molecules that reset the cell function so that this whole transcription gene pathway starts to work again, and we get the results coming back. And I'm now acting and dealing with all the stresses in my environment in an appropriate way. I know that might be a lot, but that's kind of a summary of how I see cellular health and
Amazing.
redox.
You've never said it like that before. I think you've been holding back.
You wanted to finish the book first.
Hey, I want to say something real quick, if I may. I'm going to backtrack a little bit to your dad. You think maybe your dad had it right? He just had the wrong company? Do you think maybe he saw this model that he didn't want to work and be making somebody else all the money? Maybe deep down, Lee, he understood this model. And you know what I admire about him? He didn't quit.
Kept trying. Yeah.
How many people today, Lee, they try a couple things, those things don't work out, and what do they say? Leave me alone. But you know what? I think maybe there's a degree of admiration for your father because he never quit.
Well,
People don't understand sometimes what we do.
Well, I can't disagree with that. The difference here, and then I'll draw a parallel to maybe help everybody else, is that you and everybody else are looking at what went on in this this family culture from the outside in, and we all looked at it from the inside out, and we had different messaging going on and different values there, and so that's been the hard transition. And I guess the message to everybody else is that sometimes you get into this intellectually and you go, yes, I hear what you're saying. And intellectually, I understand leverage. I understand the mechanics. I understand, how to accelerate and all the wonderful things. And I can speak that now just as well as, the next person. But still, there's a 7-year-old boy or girl inside every one of us. And it's sitting there, and I think what, not to wax like the psychologist here or anything, but it's like what we wind up doing is we want to punch it off our shoulder because he's there chirping in our ear. We're trying to punch it off our shoulder and to deny it and to discount it, rather than to say, pet the little bird on the back and say, yes, I know, I hear, it's okay, and to let other things take over. Until you can get to a place where it's a faded memory because you have dealt with that. But I don't think it really ever goes away. I just don't think that our brain is wired that way. But we can move past it, and having the support groups that we have, in hearing people like you and everybody else on our call who would chime in and say, boy, I can relate to that. This happened in my family, or I got ridiculed or made fun of, or I was shamed or whatever. That's a real that's a visceral thing. And you can intellectualize yourself about that all you want. But unless you recognize it, you're going to constantly be taken down by it and not know why. And then you feel like a failure. Because you didn't address it.
Yeah, I don't know if this is the right time or the right place, but my parents were divorced when I was young, and my father was an oral surgeon, but he was also a heavy binge drinker at night. And towards the end of his life, he was drinking a fifth of Jack Daniels a night. And I always felt like I had issues with my dad, but not my mom. And so, I ended up having a lot of issues with my mom because I left and went to my dad's house when I was 14. But here's what I learned to do, Lee, is my therapist had me write a letter to my mother, and I had to read it to my mom. And wow, the hardest part was standing up and going to sit in that chair that was facing me. And I had to answer this as if I was my mother answering back to me. And my mom had some tragedy in her life, and I instantly realized that my mom did the best job that she could, and I forgave her, and it just set me free. And you're right, we all have that little Jiminy Cricket whispering in our ears. And just another topic, I get off that before I start bawling like a baby. But why does it seem to take a challenge like you experienced with Stephanie and I experienced with my back issues? Maureen, you kind of had that with your husband.
Mhm.
Can you, I don't know if Maureen, if you want to even talk about that, but it just seems like we all are what I now have deemed until people. Well, until something happens, right? Well, I don't need to look at this. Can you maybe address why everybody does need this now,
Sure.
Maureen? Whether they have anything going on that they're aware of or
They're
not.
aware of, yeah.
Yeah.
Great point. And, I always tell people when you're sharing it and people aren't hearing, I say it's not important until it's important. And people don't really understand what this is. And there's a lot of biases, right? I'm hearing this and it's touching my heart, but I have, family members who say, if this product is so great, why isn't it sold in stores? Why don't doctors know about it? And you have to understand we're ahead of the curve. We this gifted few know about this before mainstream does, which is a very interesting and wonderful place to be, but it's also a little awkward. But, now that we know this is physiology, and I loved how eloquently Lee explained it. And it's actually opened up more questions in my mind than answered, because I'm now kind of rethinking what he was saying, because this is a fairly new field of science, but it's a part of physiology that maybe we didn't know about or didn't understand. And now we're learning more and more about it. We're just scratching the surface. It wasn't that long ago that when people were sick, they did bloodletting, right? They would put IVs or whatever in and let the blood out to let the bad humors out. Now we're more likely to do a blood transfusion, right? Because those people who got bloodletting didn't always do that well. So science and medicine are continuing to evolve as we learn. This is just something new that we're learning, that we're understanding. It's what I call the secret language of your cells. We know about hormones, we know about neurotransmitters. Now we're learning about redox signaling molecules. It's just a deeper communication, cell to cell, helps to turn on the genes like Dr. Ostler was talking about. But you heard him say inflammation is the basis of disease. We're under attack. We have been under attack for quite some time. Our food sources, the water that we drink, the air that we breathe, electromagnetic fields, there are so many things that our bodies are having to deal with that maybe our parents and grandparents didn't have to deal with. So there's an onslaught. So even if you think you're healthy, your body is being attacked every day, all the time. And you have a disease, you have things brewing long before you get the symptoms. So here's something that you can do. You can invest in yourself and you can replenish these molecules. You can help to increase that signaling, correct the communication between your cells, turn on the beneficial genes, and have a healthier lifestyle. Because we just had a conversation today about blue zones. If you don't know about that, it's where people live to be over 100 years old, and some live to be, much older than that. And what is different about what they do? You guys, this is a little biohack that allows us to participate in something that's going to make our bodies work better. It's an investment, but you're worth it. right? So thank you.
Best, yeah, and the best way to break a skeptic is to try it. And if you spend the next 90 days seeing what the body can do to heal itself and get into balance, you will be like blown away. This really does work. And we're just so thankful that, you know, Vertus Norton made the decision to take this to the world. And if you're new and you haven't seen the Genesis video, it'd be worth your time. There's a short version and a long version to see the heart of this person, the compassion, and thank God he did, or none of us would be sitting here today. So we're very thankful that he chose to go network marketing, or this would not be known.
Yeah, exactly. Lee, because someone asked the question, and when someone brings up pyramid, first off, corporate America is a pyramid.
Yeah.
Your family organization is a pyramid. The strongest structure on the planet is a pyramid. But Lee, can you explain real quick why this category creator that no one has ever heard anything about, why it's not FDA, and why it had to come out through friendship, relationship, loving relationship marketing?
Yeah, that's, obviously I looked at that very carefully because that was part of my due diligence was to get that chicken bone to go from here to here, right? So it could go
Right.
down.
Well,
And
hopefully you puked it up.
Yeah,
yeah,
it's gone.
one of the you brought up the Genesis video, and I would encourage people to go look at that. That was an important piece of information for me, was to know the real history of this. In my mind, I'm thinking this has to be legitimate, right? And it was. I mean, I came at it as a health professional, and I can remember when I toured the facility, there were a couple of other physicians there, and we talked about it afterwards. It's like, wasn't that so cool to know the history of why this came about the way it came about? This was originally in the biotech arena to become a pharmaceutical. I mean, they'd spent 17 years and millions of dollars trying to make this into a drug, and they were unsuccessful making it a drug because part of that is the safety trials of increasing the dose of the agent until half of the laboratory animals perish or die. And then you have the lethal dose 50 or the LD50, and the FDA gives you that. Then you can be a drug, and you're now on schedule, and it can be prescribed and controlled and used. Well, they couldn't accomplish that, and because this is non-toxic. By definition, it's non-toxic because it does not activate those inflammatory pathways. So there's no toxic response, zero. And so that frustrated them greatly, and they started to go down, and Vertus came along and said, well, we're going to take this over and we're going to flip it to the supplemental side. The FDA rules on the supplement mean that you can't make medical claims, and you can't talk about disease processes, and the research that you did and all of that preparatory work can't come with it. So you kind of start over. Those were the conditions. But by doing that, what they noticed, the story they tell is that while they were doing the research, the stuff was going out the back door in mason jars and going through all the neighborhood. It was like they were doing their little side tests on it, and everybody that was getting it seemed to be getting better, especially some people with some pretty grave issues. And so they recognized that that's what was happening, and that it was spreading word of mouth as quickly as anything. And within a couple of months, there were hundreds of people that were becoming aware of this and were coming back asking for more. And so they turned down the offer to flip this to a pharmaceutical company and take their money and run. And they decided that if this was going to be done right, it's not going to be an Amazon business. It's not going to be a brick and mortar. We're not going to find distributor companies, to sublet this out to. They made this a networking thing where people can tell people, because now we can tell the story. We can tell you the story about my thinking and my GI health and my hair regrowth and my eyesight. One of the interesting stories with my wife is that she didn't tell you, but through a lot of this, she had a lot of eye problems. She's had some duct surgery, dry eyes. She was taking pain medicine just to control eye pain. I mean, there was a lot of issues going on. It was just not getting better. So when she began using this, even applying the moisture of it into her eye, the complaints started to go down. I remember one time I walked in the house and she goes, "We got to go see the eye doctor again." And I was like, "Why? Like, what now?" Right? And she goes, "There's these dark lines that are all going around my eyes, and there's a problem. And I think I've got a problem." And so I'm like, "Okay, so when are we going to get an eye appointment?" So anyway, 2 or 3 days later, she said, "Oh, we don't need to," called it off. And I go, "What? Did it just get better?" She goes, "No, I figured out what the dark lines were. It was my eyelashes growing back in." And so, this affects everybody in all sorts of ways. So we can tell those stories. And again, we can connect the dots. We can extrapolate that information to whatever, is going on. Well, if it worked for them, could it work for me? I don't know. Try it. And so this pyramid thing, I mean, when you think about it, isn't that what real estate is? Every broker out there has an army of agents that are in a pyramid, and they're making a little money off them. And if you want to make more money, you get more agents. It's all a pyramid. That's what every employment situation is. And I get that in the 70s and 60s and whatnot, there were some bad apples, some bad fish in the pond that took advantage of that and ruined it. And laws were made, and these taglines, and identifiers became commonplace. But done right, that's pretty much cleaned up, and the bad apples, today get sorted out, and you kind of figure out who they are. But the concept, if it's done right with integrity, you are getting one person. Just think of the math. One person tells two, that tells now you're at 4, it doubles to 8 and 16. And all of a sudden, by me getting just a little bit in the compensation plan from a lot of people, I have now diversified my income. I have leveraged my income streams. If somebody in Taiwan, drops off the boat, it's like, okay, I might lose a few nickels, but I still have thousands of more coming from other marketplaces around the globe. So I've insulated myself. Jim, you're the stockbroker. You know all about diversification. So in this leveraged triangle, if you will, I am building an organization underneath. And it's not just, again, I go back to this, get rich quick thing, because that's the way it's been labeled. It's a lot of work. I mean, this is a mechanism. If you want to know how to make money, study the compensation plan and just do the things that the compensation plan rewards. It's about telling people, it's about explaining it. And now, with this, hopefully, you can just say, look, the science is, I'm not going to go so far as to say the science is settled, but you can certainly say Dr. Ostler's figured it out. And so it must be okay. Get the book and read it, knock yourself out if you want. But in the meantime, just get this stuff, try it, because I think it will help. That's exactly what our physician told us to do. I think this will help. Get some.
Yeah. Well, tell us how people get the book. What's the easiest way to get a
Well,
copy?
the easiest way is to go to redoxmatters.com. On there, there's some other site articles that give a summary and some kind of background information. And there'll be a link there where you can order it.
Cool.
Awesome.
I want to make a comment real quick about bad apples. I don't care what industry you're in. There's bad apples. As a broker, they used to have what they call boiler rooms, where they dealt in what's called penny stocks. And those people rapidly abuse. Well, they shut all those down. They shut down the bad ones. And, same thing in the medical field, right? Aren't there a handful of bad doctors? Thank God they don't judge y'all based on a couple of bad apples. So don't do that to us. And if people just what Ann said is watch that Genesis video, you'll understand the heart of a company. And guys, I'll flat out tell you, you'll never find anything else like this ever again. Right, Maureen? I mean, Maureen, based with your vast experience, we've got 5 minutes. How big is this? And same thing with you, Lee. How big of an opportunity? Because Maureen, I'm going to say you and Lee are literally a handful of people that maybe understand how massive this is. Because it works on everything alive, plants, animals, humans, again, zero talk, native to everything. We can't comprehend this. And that's why people have a hard time, because it sounds snake oily and too good to be true.
Yeah, snake salt. Yeah.
Right?
No,
Yeah.
absolutely. When we first got in and there wasn't all that much science, there were the studies that were done by Dr. David Neiman at the Appalachian State Human Performance Lab, which is what I looked at. My husband, had an issue. And when I saw what was happening with the athletes, in my mind, I concocted that must have had to do with oxygenation because they could run further, faster, longer. And, initially it almost seemed like if you watch that movie, My Big Fat Greek Wedding, and the father would run around with the Windex, I was like,
Windex.
yeah, this is like Windex or pixie dust, not really sure. And, we didn't know, people would say, oh, yeah, we were spritzing it. People would say, oh, I'm using it on my knee and I still have knee discomfort. And it's like, well, I don't know. It worked on her knee or it worked on his sleep or, we just really didn't have a lot to hang our hats on. But once it became a little bit more clear how this was working and why it was working on so many things and why some things might take a little longer than others, or why you can be on the product like my family for 8 years and still have benefits coming up that you're like, are you kidding? Now this is getting better because, the body is like, problems are like an onion. You're just peeling away layers. And you guys, when I got involved, and it's been, almost 9 years, I've been sharing it for 8.5. I sat on the sidelines for 6 months, which was a horrible mistake. But I remember I just was focused on my husband getting his health back, kind of like Dr. Lee was focused on Stephanie getting her health back, and Ann was focused on Jim. But I heard Alan Noble give a talk, and he said, at that time, he said, we span 2 different markets. We span health and wellness, and we span athletic performance. And he said, there will come a day in the future when we will be order takers because people will realize that they've got an edge when they take this. Every athlete is going to want to be on this because it is totally safe. There's nothing in it to be banned, and it gives them the racer's edge. Everybody wants to look younger, feel younger, be younger. Everybody's going to want these products. And something clicked. I had an entrepreneurial spirit, and I thought, oh my gosh, we are at the beginning of something amazing. Now, you guys, like I said, I've been in it for 9 years, and nobody has figured out how to come up with a copycat of this yet. We are a category creator. We are foundational to health. We are the only ones who have figured out the secret of how to make this, and nobody is even in our rear view mirror. You have the ability to go out and change people's lives with this. This is absolutely huge. When we say that this is one of the biggest discoveries in health science in our lifetime, we're not saying that lightly. It absolutely is. And I will give it over to the expert who can probably expand upon that even more. Dr. Lee.
1 minute, Lee. I'm going to do the 1 minute routine with you. 1 minute.
Sorry, I'm chatty.
Oh, you're great. That's awesome.
So this is about taking, when you can marry something that is so strong in science, and you can marry it with something that is so strong and has great integrity with leadership and the machine, if you will, to get this out there, that you can tap into that with the confidence of the foundation and the assurance that this is real. We used the word snake oil earlier. You put those two together, and it's like, why not? This is a category creator, which means we don't have any competition. This isn't nutrition. You still need all of that. You still need lifestyle. This is what activates it and makes it work at that foundational level. So thank you. It's been a pleasure to be on with y'all, and this is for you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Everybody
I
has
want to close with this quote. Do you want to release the doctor within you that knows you quite well, or do you want to go to a doctor that's practicing medicine?
I like
Is
that,
that
Jim.
right, Maureen? I mean, they're practicing.
Yes, because it's an art. Hey,
That they're practicing on you.
They are practicing on you. So yeah, tap into that inner doctor. But Dr. Lee, I don't want to make work for you, but if people get your book, can they bring it to Nashville and get it signed? And are you going to have some books there?
I will have some books there. You can bring your own. I would, either way, if you bring your own, then I will be able to take the ones that I have and give to those who are there. But if you already have it, bring it with you. Be reading it though.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it's awesome.
So guys, thank you.
Who's next week?
Dr. Richard Michael is with us next week. He's a Duke graduate doctor that has some rather remarkable stories. He's from North Carolina. We love and adore him. He's one of our fan favorites. But I think our bestest, is that a word? Our
No,
bestest fan favorite is Dr. Ostler now. So I don't know, Maureen. We might have to step down and just give it all over to him.
You know, he does a great job, doesn't he?
He
And
does.
you know
Lee, you
what?
said some things tonight that were I haven't heard you say those things before. So
excellent.
guys, thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Maureen, we
you
love
guys.
you. We love you guys so much. Thank you all for joining. Please come back and revisit us next week. Every Friday, right here, we are the Asea 5 sharing the gift that we've been given with
That's
the
right.
world. Thank you, guys.
Bye,
Thank
everybody.
Everybody have a
Bye.
good weekend.
Have a
Bye.
great weekend. Okay.